She was just in seat 12F until her call sign made the F-22 jets salute. Sunlight streamed through the narrow cabin windows, glinting off silver armrests as Flight 417 crossed the upper atmosphere. In seat 12F, Alyssa Grant sat upright, her worn leather bag tucked beneath her feet, eyes steady on the horizon beyond the glass. Nothing about her khaki jacket or scuffed travel shoes signaled importance. She looked like any quiet passenger on a midweek flight. Across the aisle, Martin Cole shifted noisily, his voice carrying over the low hum of engines. "Figures," he muttered to Sophie Price, the stylish woman beside him. "Military discount, middle seat, probably hoping for an upgrade." Sophie smirked, adjusting her designer scarf. "She does not exactly scream first class," she whispered back, loud enough for Alyssa to hear. Alyssa did not move. Her fingers rested lightly on her armrest, the faint outline of a scar visible on her wrist when the sunlight hit it. She traced it once with her thumb, a gesture as disciplined as her posture. Outwardly, she remained still. Inwardly, something older and heavier stirred. The aircraft tilted a fraction, and the cabin light shifted. Alyssa's gaze sharpened for a heartbeat, then softened again. Passengers around her noticed only a quiet woman traveling alone. What they could not know, and what none of them expected, was that the stranger they mocked had guided fleets through skies far more dangerous than this. Their flight was about to show them why respect can never be measured by appearance alone. Rain had been falling when Alyssa left her small rental car at the airport that morning.
She had carried only a single overnight bag, the same leather bag now tucked under her seat.
Inside it, wrapped in a folded t-shirt, lay a tarnished medal and a dog-eared notebook stamped in faded ink, Raven 6. She had slipped both items in without thinking. Old habits die hard, even when you have been out of uniform for years. Most of the passengers saw only a quiet traveler with no entourage and no expensive luggage. They could not know that Alyssa Grant had once commanded a squadron of F-22s, guiding her pilots through missions where a single misstep meant disaster. She had logged thousands of flight hours, trained hundreds of younger officers, and carried decisions that had changed lives far from civilian eyes. Yet she had left that world with no ceremony, choosing anonymity over applause. Today's flight to Washington was not a business trip or a vacation. It was a pilgrimage to a memorial service for 3 comrades who had never made it home. Alyssa had learned long ago that rank does not travel with you once you step off base. In civilian life, no one saluted. No one deferred. People cut in line. They spoke over you. They called you ma'am, with a tone that meant anything but respect. She had accepted it without protest. Training had drilled composure into her bones. You do not flinch when someone shouts. You do not snap back when someone provokes. You hold the line. Across the aisle, Martin Cole scrolled through his phone, smirking at something on the screen. Sophie Price leaned close, whispering a comment that made them both laugh softly. Their glances drifted toward Alyssa more than once, quick and assessing. They saw a middle-aged woman with close-cropped hair and a neutral expression. They did not see the small silver wings stitched into the lining of her bag. They did not see the nights she had spent awake in briefing rooms, rehearsing missions she could never describe to them. A patch of clear blue sky slid past the window. Alyssa's reflection stared back at her from the glass, faint but unmistakable. She had aged since those days at Edwards Air Force Base, yet the look in her eyes had not softened. It was the look of someone who had carried responsibility far heavier than a carry-on bag. She reached into the leather bag and brushed her fingertips over the edge of the notebook. Raven 6, her call sign, her identity in the air. The name had once echoed across secure channels as jets streaked in formation, her voice steady while others faltered. She did not open the notebook now. She only held it for a moment, then slid it back beneath the t-shirt. The hum of the engines filled the cabin like a low heartbeat. A flash of memory cut through the present, the smell of jet fuel at dawn, her helmet pressed tight, the horizon glowing orange as she led her squadron into a training exercise that had turned suddenly real. She had been at the front, calm as her pilots checked in one by one. Raven 6 copy. Raven 6 visual. Standing by. Even in the thickest tension, she had never raised her voice. Authority did not always need volume. The flight attendant pushed a cart down the aisle, offering drinks. Martin waved for another whiskey. Sophie asked for sparkling water, her bracelets clinking. When the attendant reached Alyssa, she requested plain water. No ice. Her tone was courteous, neutral. The attendant smiled back automatically, not recognizing anything more than a polite passenger. Outside the window, clouds gathered in slow motion, building towers of white that hinted at rougher air ahead. Alyssa's gaze lingered on them. Her instincts measured altitude, wind shift, and light without conscious effort. She had lived too many hours in cockpits not to read the sky. The seatbelt sign had not yet lit up. No one else seemed to notice. She adjusted her posture slightly, one hand still on the armrest. A small scar on her wrist caught the light again. It was not from a kitchen knife or a fall. It was from a canopy latch during a hard landing years ago, a moment that could have ended far worse. That scar had stayed while medals had been packed away. It reminded her of the thin line between command and catastrophe. The captain's voice broke through the cabin speakers, calm but clipped. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are expecting some light turbulence ahead. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." A few passengers groaned. Someone chuckled nervously. Martin rolled his eyes and muttered something about typical. Sophie dabbed at her lipstick with a napkin. Alyssa's hands tightened on the armrests only enough to keep steady. She had flown through conditions that made this feel like a gentle sway. Another flash of memory flickered, her squadron slicing through crosswinds over the Gulf, instruments warning of incoming weather. She had kept her formation tight, voice level, eyes scanning. Raven 6, hold course. Raven 6, copy. The memory faded as the present returned. The plane gave a small shudder. Overhead bins rattled softly. Passengers shifted uneasily. Alyssa's expression did not change. Her breathing stayed slow and measured. She glanced at the window again, then at the aisle leading toward the cockpit. Something in her eyes hardened just for an instant. Then it was gone. Martin noticed and smirked. "Not a fan of turbulence, huh?" he said loudly enough for Sophie to hear. Sophie gave a light laugh. Alyssa did not answer. She only reached once more for the water the attendant had left, lifted it, and drank slowly. Her scar caught the light again, the faintest signal of a story neither of them would ever guess, at least not yet. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the sound of the seatbelt sign chimes overhead. Flight attendants exchange quick glances and begin to move down the aisle with a new urgency, fastening galley latches and tugging at overhead compartments. Conversations hush, the subtle change in their voices sending a ripple of unease through the rows. Alyssa Grant sits motionless in seat 12F, one hand resting on the worn leather strap of her bag. Her posture is composed, but her eyes flick toward the window, scanning the pale blue horizon beyond the double-paned glass. The air outside looks strangely fractured, a shimmer of heat waves bending the light. Her fingers tighten almost imperceptibly. Martin Cole leans back with an exaggerated sigh. "Great," he mutters loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "We paid for a smooth flight, not a roller coaster." He turns toward Sophie Price and smirks. "What is the captain doing up there, trying to set some kind of record?" "We are not at war." His words earn a few nervous chuckles from other passengers who are already gripping their armrests a little tighter. Sophie tosses her hair and glances toward Alyssa with a faint, superior smile. "Probably another budget airline mishap," she whispers. "They hire anyone these days." Her perfume drifts across the row like a curtain. Alyssa keeps her gaze fixed outside. Her breathing remains steady, each inhale measured, each exhale silent. Beyond the wingtip, something moves, a flicker of gray slicing through the sunlit air. It is far off. So far, the casual eye would dismiss it as a cloud shadow. She does not dismiss it. The angle, the speed, the signature streak of contrails. They are all too familiar. The plane banks gently, more sharply than before. Overhead bins creak as a few unsecured items shift inside. A baby begins to cry 2 rows back. A businessman mutters about missing his connection. Small anxieties build like static, crawling along the cabin walls. Captain Jordan Ellis's voice comes over the PA, smooth but curiously vague. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We are adjusting altitude and heading for routine procedures. Please remain seated with your seatbelt securely fastened." The announcement ends with a soft click. There is no mention of weather or turbulence, no mention of traffic ahead. Just routine procedures. Martin snorts and waves a dismissive hand at the ceiling speaker. "Routine procedures?" Sure, that sounded reassuring. He swivels toward Alyssa. "You seem awfully calm about all this. Do you fly a lot or something?" Alyssa does not answer. Her eyes are locked on the horizon where a second flicker has appeared, this one closer, its outline sharper. Her right thumb strokes the edge of the dog-eared notebook inside her bag, the one marked Raven 6, though she does not open it. Not yet. Sophie rolls her eyes at Martin's theatrics and begins tapping out a message on her phone. The signal icon flickers and dies. Ugh, no service now? Typical. She slips the phone back into her purse, oblivious to the low thrum building under the floor. Alyssa tilts her head slightly. She hears it, the faint but unmistakable roar of engines she has not heard since her service days. The rhythm is ingrained in her memory, the approach of a formation, precise and disciplined. A ripple of heat rises in her chest, part instinct, part adrenaline, but her face remains unreadable. The flight attendants move briskly again, checking seatbelts, stowing coffee carts, their smiles thinner now. One of them pauses beside Alyssa, murmurs a polite reminder about keeping her bag under the seat. Alyssa nods once, calm, but her gaze flicks back to the window. Outside, a third shadow cuts across the wingtip. The pattern is complete. She knows what it is. Martin leans across the aisle, voice dripping sarcasm. "Hey, Captain's friend over there," he says toward Alyssa. "You see anything interesting out your little window? Or are you just meditating while we spiral out of control?" Alyssa blinks slowly, neither confirming nor denying. Inside her mind, a dozen calculations are already running. Distance, speed, configuration, the possible reasons for their presence. But she stays silent. The time for words has not come. Sophie notices the tension in Alyssa's shoulders. "You look like you recognize something," she says, half teasing, half unsettled. "Do you?" Alyssa's eyes remain on the sky. Her voice is low but clear. "I know that sound," she says simply, then lapses back into silence. Her answer lands like a stone in water, sending ripples through the nearby passengers. Martin frowns. Sophie leans back. The plane makes another subtle turn. Passengers shift uneasily. Overhead, a suitcase clunks against the bin wall. The baby's cries rise. A man presses the call button for a flight attendant who never comes. The steady hum of a normal flight is gone, replaced by an electric tension hanging in the air. Alyssa draws a steady breath and lifts her chin. Out beyond the wing, a sleek grey shape slides fully into view for a heartbeat. No longer a flicker, no longer deniable. It vanishes again into the sun glare, but not before her trained eyes read its markings. She closes her hand over the edge of her bag and waits. They have no idea who sits in 12F, not yet. But the sky outside tells her the moment of anonymity is ending. The moment begins with a sharp collective breath. Two sleek gray aircraft slide into view on the left side of the plane, their wings catching the sun like blades. They hold perfect distance, nose to tail, moving in unison. The cabin fills with a low gasp, as if every passenger feels the same chill at once. Someone near the back whispers, "Fighter jets." Another voice answers, "Why are they here?" Phones rise into the air, camera lenses pressed to the windows. The soft click of shutters mixes with murmurs that sound like prayers. A child tugs at her mother's sleeve and points outside with wide eyes. The plane stays steady, but the air inside feels heavy. Martin Cole, who had spent the first part of the flight making jokes, sits stiff now. His jaw moves, but no words come at first. He forces a laugh that cracks halfway through. This must be some kind of drill," he says loudly, as if volume can keep panic at bay. "Nothing to worry about." His hand trembles slightly on the armrest. Sophie Price clutches her designer bag to her chest. The subtle sneer she wore earlier is gone. Her eyes flick from the window to the aisle to the cabin door, as though escape might be hidden somewhere. "This is not normal," she murmurs. Her fingers tighten on the leather straps of her purse until her knuckles pale. A flight attendant moves quickly down the aisle, voice taut. "Please stay seated with your seatbelts fastened." She glances at the windows but does not slow her pace. Another attendant whispers something into the intercom near the galley, her hands shaking. Alyssa Grant remains in seat 12F, spine straight, hands steady on her knees. She watches the jets with a gaze that holds no surprise, only calculation. Her training drills echo like distant thunder in her mind. The pattern of the formation, the spacing, the way they signal with wing dips. Every gesture is a language she understands. Her thumb brushes the corner of the small notebook marked Raven 6 inside her bag. The touch steadies her heartbeat. She could stay silent and hope the situation resolves without her. She could keep her head down like any other passenger. But the muscle memory of years in uniform does not vanish. Neither does duty. Martin turns to her, eyes wide now. "You look like you know something," he says, his voice thin. "What is happening? Are we in danger?" He leans closer, desperate for an answer. Alyssa does not reply. She draws a slow breath through her nose, her face calm. In her mind, she sees flashes of another life. Standing at the front of her squadron in desert heat, the smell of fuel and sand. Her voice over the radio, Raven 6 on approach. Jets banking under her command like hawks in a hunt. She remembers the weight of leadership, the quiet space between decisions and consequences. Sophie speaks again, softer now, almost pleading. "Please tell us it is fine." She looks at Alyssa the way passengers look at crew in turbulence, searching for a clue in their expression. The plane jolts slightly as it shifts altitude. Overhead compartments rattle. A baby cries. Someone in the back says, "They think we are hijacked." Another voice answers, "No, it is an escort." Rumors leap from row to row like sparks, each one feeding the next. Captain Jordan Ellis's voice comes over the PA again, still even but less smooth than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are in communication with traffic control. Everything is under control." The message ends abruptly. The silence that follows is worse than the announcement. Alyssa's eyes move from the window to the cockpit door at the front of the plane. The jets outside are close enough now that she can see the pilots' helmets glinting. A signal flashes, a dip of a wing. It is not a threat, but a request. She understands it instantly. Her stomach tightens, but her hands stay steady. She reaches down, unbuckles her seatbelt with a quiet click, and stands. The movement draws immediate attention. Martin grabs her sleeve. "Where are you going?" he asks, his voice breaking. "You cannot just walk around now." Alyssa looks at him, her tone even. "Stay seated. You will be fine." She gently frees her arm and steps into the aisle. Sophie stares up at her. "Who are you?" she whispers. Alyssa gives no answer, only a small nod before turning toward the front. She walks with measured steps, her boots silent on the carpet. Each stride carries the weight of discipline and decision. The cabin parts around her like water. Passengers lean back into their seats, their eyes following her progress. The noise of panic softens, curiosity threading through fear. Who is this woman who moves so calmly toward the locked door? Inside her mind, radio chatter rises like an echo. "Raven 6, you are clear for approach." She sees herself years earlier, leading her team through a tight corridor of airspace, her voice steady despite the stakes. That voice is still hers. That steadiness is still hers. She stops before the cockpit door, one hand resting on the panel. She looks once more at the window. The fighters hold their place outside, waiting. Her reflection stares back at her in the small, polished surface near the door handle. Plain clothes, simple bag, nothing to mark her rank. Only she knows the truth. Behind her, whispers ripple through the rows. Is she crew? She looks military. Why is she going up there? Martin sits frozen, his bravado gone, watching her with a mixture of fear and hope. Sophie clutches her bag tighter, her eyes locked on Alyssa, as if the stranger's calm might be the only steady thing left in the cabin. Alyssa lifts her chin, knocks once, and waits. In the hush that follows, the sound of the fighter jets outside grows louder, filling the cabin like a drumbeat. The moment stretches, balanced between panic and revelation. Alyssa has made her choice. Alyssa stops at the cockpit door, one hand flat against the panel. The aisle behind her feels like a living current of breathless questions. The fighter jets outside hang in the sky like silent guardians, sunlight flashing across their wings. A flight attendant hurries up, blocking her path with a polite but firm arm. "Ma'am, you cannot be up here," she says, voice tight. "Please return to your seat." Alyssa meets her eyes without a flicker of challenge. She reaches slowly into her bag and produces a slim black wallet. She opens it just enough for the attendant to see the insignia inside. The attendant's breath catches. Her eyes dart to the cockpit door. She lowers her arm without a word. Another attendant presses the intercom button near the door and murmurs something. A soft click follows, and the cockpit door opens a narrow crack. Captain Jordan Ellis peers out, his brow furrowed. "Yes?" he begins, but the word stops halfway. His gaze drops to the ID in Alyssa's hand. The lines of his face shift from irritation to recognition. "Commander Grant?" he says quietly. Alyssa nods once. "I need your radio," she says. "Secure frequency." The captain's eyes flick past her to the cabin where passengers lean forward, straining to see. He opens the door wider. "Come in," he says, voice low. "Quickly." Alyssa slips inside and the door closes behind her, cutting off the whispers and the rising noise. The cockpit feels small and bright, every gauge glowing, every sound amplified. The first officer turns in his seat, surprise written across his face. "Is that—" he begins. "Yes," Captain Ellis says. "Commander Alyssa Grant, former squadron leader." Alyssa sets her bag on the floor, slides into the jump seat behind the pilots, and pulls the headset toward her. Her movements are calm, practiced, almost ritual. She tunes the radio to an emergency frequency, fingers flying over the dials with muscle memory that never faded. She presses the transmit button. "Raven 6 to flight group on my tail," she says, voice steady but carrying weight. "Identify yourselves and state your intention." A crackle answers, then a voice that is crisp and respectful. "Copy, Raven 6. This is Sentinel Lead. We are your escort. Awaiting your clearance for corridor." The words land in the cockpit like a small thunderclap. Captain Ellis glances at his first officer, then back at Alyssa. She gives the slightest nod. "Sentinel Lead, hold pattern," she says into the mic. "Civilian aircraft will comply with procedure. Stand by for signal." "Roger, Raven 6, the voice replies. Standing by. Outside the window, the lead jet tilts its wings in acknowledgement. Its partner mirrors the move, a slow, gleaming arc against the sky. Captain Ellis exhales a breath he had been holding. "They know you," he says quietly. Alyssa lowers the headset, her eyes scanning the horizon. "We trained together," she says. "Different call signs, same airspace." Her tone carries no pride, only fact. She slips the headset back on and makes a few more quick calls, coordinating altitude and heading with precision. When the immediate communication ends, she hands the headset back to the captain. "You are clear," she says. "They will stay with us until we are out of restricted airspace." Captain Ellis's voice trembles slightly. "I think our passengers need to hear something," he says. Alyssa nods. "Tell them," she says simply. He presses the PA button, his hand still shaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice booms through the cabin speakers, "please remain calm. We have a very special passenger aboard today. I am honored to inform you that the individual who just helped secure our flight is Commander Alyssa Grant, retired squadron leader of the United States Air Force." The words ripple down the cabin like a tide. Heads turn. Mouths fall open. The whispers rise and then die into stunned silence. In seat 12F, now empty, a dog-eared notebook marked Raven 6 sits visible at the top of Alyssa's bag. Martin Cole stares at it as if it can explain what he has just heard. His voice is a whisper. "Commander?" Sophie Price presses her bag tighter to her chest, eyes wide, her earlier disdain melted into awe. She saved us?" she says softly. Outside, the two fighter jets glide closer, their wings gleaming. In perfect symmetry, they tilt again, a formal salute. Sunlight pours through the windows, turning metal and sky into a single dazzling sheet of silver. Passengers press their faces to the glass, some with tears in their eyes, others holding up their phones to capture the moment. Captain Ellis speaks again over the PA. "We are safe. Please give your respect to Commander Grant for her years of service and for her composure today." His voice cracks at the end, a note of emotion breaking through professionalism. A hush spreads through the cabin. Martin looks at Sophie. Sophie looks at Martin. Both seem smaller somehow, their earlier bravado and sarcasm gone. Around them, passengers exchange glances of shame and admiration. The woman they mocked for her plain clothes has turned out to be the calm center of their crisis. At the cockpit door, Alyssa pauses before stepping back into the cabin. She can hear the muted sound of applause beginning, hesitant at first, then swelling as more passengers join in. She does not smile yet. Her face remains composed, eyes bright with something deeper than pride. Duty, perhaps. Memory. A connection to the sky outside and the people she once led. Through the small side window, she can still see the jets holding formation. One of the pilots raises a gloved hand in a visible salute, captured perfectly by a passenger's camera. The image will travel far beyond this flight, but in this moment it belongs only to those inside. Alyssa takes a breath and opens the door. The cabin falls silent. All eyes turn to her. The cabin feels completely different now, Moments ago it held a crackling current of fear. Now it hums with awe and quiet shame. The same passengers who had whispered jokes or rolled their eyes sit upright, their faces pale with realization. A soft wave of murmurs travels from row to row, apologies half-formed, gratitude taking shape in hushed voices. Martin Cole stares at the empty seat 12F as if it can answer him. He swallows hard, his throat working. For a long time he says nothing. Then he rises slowly, pressing a hand to the top of the seat in front of him for balance. "Commander Grant," he calls toward the front, his voice unsteady. I owe you an apology." His words falter, but the sincerity in them is unmistakable. "Thank you for what you have done." "Thank you for your service." A few passengers glance at him in surprise, then begin to nod. Someone in the back claps once. Another joins. The sound builds row by row until it becomes a steady applause rolling through the cabin like distant thunder. The rhythm carries no hint of panic now. It carries respect. Sophie Price sits frozen for a heartbeat, then rises as well. Her designer bag rests forgotten at her feet. She reaches into the seat pocket, pulls out an unopened bottle of water, and walks it up the aisle with trembling hands. "Commander," she says softly when she reaches Alyssa. "Please, you must be thirsty." Her eyes glisten. "I am sorry for how I acted." Alyssa looks at her, then at the bottle. She accepts it with a small nod, no judgment in her eyes. "Thank you," she says simply. She does not add anything else. Her gaze slides to the window where the jets still hold formation, sunlight flashing on their wings. In her mind, she sees faces of old comrades, pilots who will never sit in civilian seats, whose names are carved in quiet stone. The applause around her feels like it belongs to them more than to her. Captain Jordan Ellis steps out of the cockpit for a moment, his hat in his hand. The applause softens but does not stop. He approaches Alyssa and stops at her side. "Commander Grant," he says, his voice carrying through the hush. "On behalf of my crew and every soul aboard this flight, thank you. You kept us calm and you kept us safe." Alyssa straightens, but does not draw attention to herself. "I only did what needed to be done," she says. "You and your crew handled it well." She keeps her tone gentle, almost private, but the surrounding passengers hear it and shift in their seats. The humility in her words presses against the lump already in their throats. Martin lowers his eyes and sits again. He looks smaller somehow, stripped of his loudness. Sophie wipes at her cheek and returns to her seat, setting the bottle cap back on with shaky fingers. All around, passengers whisper gratitude. Some touch the edges of Alyssa's bag with shy reverence as she passes. A woman with a child leans out of her row and says, "Thank you for your service," and her voice breaks halfway through. Alyssa offers a faint smile to each, but does not linger. Her focus is outward, on the steady escort beyond the glass and on the quiet horizon ahead. The cabin is calmer now, a soft warmth replacing the earlier chill. The applause fades into a silence that feels like collective reflection. Captain Ellis returns to the cockpit, but not before giving her a firm handshake. "It has been an honor," he says. Alyssa nods once, her eyes bright but steady. She moves back to her seat as the plane levels out, and the jets begin a slow climb away, their wings tilting one last time in salute before peeling off into the blue. The passengers watch them go through the windows, some raising their hands as if waving goodbye. The moment settles over the cabin like a soft cloth. Fear has turned into respect. Disdain has become gratitude. Even those who said nothing feel changed. Alyssa sits again in 12F, buckling her belt. The dog-eared notebook marked Raven 6 rests on her lap. She closes her hand over it and exhales quietly. Around her, people still glance, but no one laughs now. The atmosphere is not just calm, it is reverent, as if a collective heartbeat has slowed to match hers. For the viewers of this scene, the change lands like a release. The person belittled for her plain clothes has shown grace under pressure. Those who mocked her have softened. The cabin holds a quiet lesson that needs no sermon. Dignity is not a costume. Respect should be given long before rank is revealed. The landing gear locked with a muffled thump beneath the cabin. Outside the oval windows, the fighter jets held their formation one last time, sunlight flashing off their wings before they began to peel away. Passengers watched in complete silence. Some pressed their palms to the glass as if trying to hold the moment in place. Commander Alyssa Grant sat quietly, her seatbelt fastened, her hands folded over the small worn bag at her knees. Inside it lay the dog-eared notebook marked Raven 6 and a medal wrapped in cloth. She did not lift them out. She had never liked displays of power. What she valued was duty done well and lives saved. When the plane rolled to a smooth stop at the gate, people rose, but did not rush for the aisle. A soft hush passed through the cabin, like the fading of a hymn. The same passengers who had once doubted or mocked her now stepped back, leaving a clear path. One older man raised his hand to his brow in a trembling salute. Another whispered a quiet thank you. Sophie Price offered a respectful nod, her eyes lowered. Martin Cole straightened his posture, as if ashamed of his earlier words. Alyssa stood and lifted her bag. She looked at each face briefly, not with pride but with calm recognition. In her mind she saw not herself but the faces of the squadron she had once led. She moved down the aisle without ceremony, boots silent on the carpet. As she crossed the jet bridge, sunlight poured through the windows. Beyond the terminal glass she could see the jets climbing higher, banking away into the open sky like sentinels returning home. She stepped into the terminal crowd and disappeared. Later that afternoon, she would arrive at the memorial, where a long wall of engraved names waited in the shade. She would place her hand against cold stone and whisper the call sign, Raven 6, under her breath. Respect, she thought, should be given freely, not only when a uniform or rank demands it. The open sky beyond the memorial seemed to echo the thought back to her, bright and endless. The story that had begun as quiet anonymity ended as a living reminder of service, dignity, and the unseen courage walking beside us every day.